Thank you all for joining us. We have a great group today to talk about investing in genomics and sort of really kind of talking about the revolution that I think is here now and that is coming in the field of genomics. So we have an esteemed group of panelists, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves, and I'll kick it off, I guess, with a brief introduction. So my name is Amanda Cashin. I am the co-founder and head of Illumina Accelerator. So Illumina Accelerator is a company formation engine focused on helping launch breakthrough startups that are working in the applications in genomics. We are based in San Francisco. We have so far 10 companies that have graduated from our 6-month funding cycle. We're about to graduate another 3, and we have a new batch of companies coming in July. So we're always recruiting and always coaching entrepreneurs in the genomics space. So I'll ask each panelist to provide a brief background of themselves. Just introduce your names, your firm, maybe 30 seconds in total about your background personally, as well as your firm's investment strategy and the types of things you're investing in. So I'll kick it over first to Ted from DeChang Capital.
Hi, I'm Ted Driscoll from DeChang Capital, and my background is in medical imaging, actually, and I focus right now on big data and digital healthcare, which includes genetics, which as far as I'm concerned is a one-dimensional image as opposed to a two-dimensional image. So I make investments in that area. I was the first investor in Natera, a non-invasive prenatal testing company, the first investor in GeneWeave, and the first investor in Assurex, all of which had big exits recently. So I'm trying to focus on how does genetics affect medicine today.
Great. Beth?
And I'm Beth Hill from J&J Innovation. I'm a strategic investor and partner for platform innovation technologies as it relates to J&J's healthcare business. I have a background in cell biology. I've been in the biotech industry for 20 years in the Bay Area before I came to this role at J&J.
And Jonathan's name might be hard to read because I have really bad handwriting, but my apologies. So Jonathan's with Alexandria Venture Investments.
So Jonathan Kabakoff. Alexandria Venture Investments is a strategic venture capital arm of Alexandria Real Estate Equities, the largest life science campus cluster developer in all the major biotech clusters, including San Diego. On our venture side, we have about $350 million invested in companies and venture funds across pretty much all areas of biotech, including diagnostics, tools, and that's where we tend to put genomics. So we're an active ag tech investor as well, and see a lot of genomics in that space. My background's in chemistry and diagnostics, and been at Alexandria for about 10 years.
Can you guys hear us okay? Should we talk a little bit closer to the mics? I feel like it's quiet. Okay, yeah. All right, Francois.
François Ferré, I'm a bio-entrepreneur. My background is in molecular genetics and oncology, and I've been in San Diego for the last 30 years. Currently involved with a fund that we started with my wife. That's it's a super angel fund. It's our own money. We've been investing in about 20 companies in San Diego, with a main focus on diagnostics and prevention, and a few in genomics as well. So we'll talk about.
All right. So to set the stage a little bit, I'll provide just a couple of stats on sort of investment trends that we've seen in the genomic space, and we really do want this to be an interactive panel. So think about questions. Raise your hand. Really the journey that we're going to go on the next 45 minutes or so is really kind of around where have we been in genomics, where are we now? So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. We'll talk a little bit about where are we going, where does the panel think we're going, or where do you guys in the audience think we're going in the field of genomics? We'll also talk about some of the challenges and opportunities in this space, talking about things like regulatory, talking about things like adoption. And then we'll also ask the panelists to kind of talk a little bit about what kind of things they're investing in, so maybe a case study or two about specific companies that we all can learn from. Maybe I'll pause for a second and just get a show of hands from the audience. Folks that are entrepreneurs in the room? Okay, so a good amount. Folks that are investors? Industry? Like other corporate kind of folks? No? What else are you, if you didn't raise your hand? Here to learn? Yeah, okay, I guess that's good. What's that?
A mystery.
A mystery, okay. Well, now we're going to have to find out what that mystery is about. Okay, so just a couple of stats. So And recent investment and activities in the genomics industry, depending on how you define it, depending on who's calculating it, range anywhere between $800 million to about $1 billion last year, and it's increasing. Even just this year, we've seen very significant financings. I think the largest in biotech history was the Series B fundraising of Grail, which is a cancer screening company. But we've also seen really large investments with the Human Longevity Institute, with Accuragen, a number of other companies that are in the genomics space. And if you look at the overall next-gen sequencing market in general, again, depending on who's calculating it, depending on what you include, folks are estimating, McKinsey in particular is estimating that the next-generation sequencing market could reach between $700 billion to $1.6 trillion by 2025. JPM has also stats around the size of the total addressable market for next-gen sequencing, and they say by 2020 it's going to reach $200 billion. So it's a pretty wide range, but if you kind of dive into different layers, I'm looking at sort of the JP Morgan report on how they're diving into defining different addressable markets. They kind of define the reproductive health unit, reproductive and genomic health unit, things like non-invasive prenatal testing, which we'll go into, to be about $5 to $6 billion. The research tools market to be about $13 billion. The cancer screening market to be about $30 billion. And even the library prep market is estimated to be about $1 billion today. So those are just some kind of overall big picture numbers, and again, it kind of always depends on who's calculating the numbers and what they're including and what time points they're evaluating. But I think it is true, genomics is here. It's big and it's growing. I think, the first question, and then I'll ask Ted to kind of kick it off, is really around where have we been and where are we now in terms of genomics over the past 5 years. We've seen a lot of expectations, even with the Human Genome Project 17 years ago, or depending on what date you use. So we've come a long way, but maybe Ted, talk about where have we been and where are we now, and then I think the other groups can kind of chime into this, again, all around sort of the opportunities in genomics.
Well, when Craig Venter sequenced the genome, I think we kind of felt like we pulled back the curtains and could actually see the information inside our bodies, but the fact is, I think we've now recognized how much we little understand it. We do not understand it very well at all. And now we also are dealing with an epigenome that turns things up or down, off or on. We're dealing with a microbiome that is changing on a daily basis based on whether we ate at a Thai restaurant or not. We are in a world of information. In fact, every human being is basically a big pile of information at this point, because we're all pretty much the same stuff. It's just, it's organized in a different way. And so I think that's the big problem now for medicine, is that they see a fatal disease in a genome, but then they don't notice the fact that the methylation pattern turns it off so that it isn't there. That's the big problem we deal with right now, is we deal with the fact that there are not only a genome, but as the cells reproduce, they sometimes have errors. Sometimes that causes cancer, for example, and you need to personalize that cancer in order to get a personalized treatment as well. So we are big piles of information, and that's the big challenge that doctors have right now. The doctors used to be test tube and pipette guys in school at pre-med. Now they're keyboard guys. In fact, my doctor wears a Google Glass the whole time when she treats me. And so she's filming me, and she's also giving me a medical record like 5 minutes after I've left the room. So this is where medicine's going. It's becoming a big data field.
Yeah, one thing that we think about at Illumina a lot, and I'll ask others to chime in, but to your point around the Human Genome Project, so that was like early 2000s, and to sequence one individual's germline DNA, it was about $3 billion, and it took several years. Well, now with the really rapid cost reduction in next-gen sequencing technology, you can now sequence one individual's whole genome for less than $1,000 a day, a little bit about $1,000 a day. So that transformation has really kind of opened up a lot of opportunities from a technology perspective, but that does, introduce new challenges in terms of how are we going to equip ourselves to handle all of this.
The doctor has to confront much more data than he used to have to confront. I had a grandson who was born 2 years ago, and as he emerged from the womb, he already had 2 gigabytes in his electronic medical record, because he had been genetically sequenced with a non-invasive prenatal test. Mm-hmm. And so as a consequence, the doctor is now confronted with too much information, more information than he can possibly consume in that period of time. I'm seeing a lot of companies now with artificial intelligence as part of their thing because they need it desperately.
Yeah,
the
it's a
doctor needs it.
big data challenge. So maybe others chime in to around
Yeah.
where are we now and where have we been in genomics?
Yeah, just to add one more dimension, I think Ted's point is really good, and it's always the case in biology, right? We learn one thing and then we realize there's even more that we don't understand. And for me, one of the interesting spaces is the ability to do that nucleic acid characterization at the single cell level, because when we sequence our genome, our germline, you specified germline, right? So because you have to specify exactly what tissue that genome is, and when you talk about a person going through life who has X, Y, and Z infectious disease and XY autoimmune disease, and maybe had fought a few cancers that never became clinically present. Now you have a very diverse set of cells in this person that are equipped in a different way than any other individual on the planet. And so, to me, a very exciting aspect of the field going forward is to be able to sequence cells that learn and respond to our environment, that tell the history of what this body has been through.
Mm.
I think the other dimension that Ted alluded to a little bit in this more complex world we're entering now, it's not only just big data, but who is going to be at the center of this big data. And I think Eric Topol was the very first one to really push that idea through his book, The Patient Will See You Now. But it's truly the new world, the new brave world we're entering. And the difficulty here that we already know that the doctors are ill-prepared to deal with big data. They're even less prepared to deal with all these patients coming with big data to them. It's one thing to have access to big data, and it's another thing to have patients showing up with his microbiome and say, what do I do next? So I think we're going to see a sea change in that, and we're not going to slow down, of course, the avalanche of big data, but we're going to try to do our best to analyze it and digest that to the doctors. So it's going to be something that's going to be actionable. And I completely agree that the big elephant in the room now, it's not just big data, because I think we know how to store and all that. It's AI. It's everything that surrounds big data is going to make it palatable not only for the patient but for the care system that the patient will be a center in. And I think we have seen nothing yet. I mean, when you start thinking about that, Patrick was just telling me, sitting in the front row here, that you can get your microbiome now sequenced for $99. We're going to see an absolute revolution. That's going to come down to soon $40 in a year or so. And so, this is really going to be transforming the way patients are thinking about approaching, the healthcare system, and certainly will push doctors to further their education. I think that's the biggest hurdle right now, is the resistance of the healthcare providers to really get the education.
Well, maybe let's kind of go with that a little bit further and talk about a specific case study. So kind of talking about where are we now in genomics. The case study around non-invasive prenatal testing, I think, is a really fantastic example of rapid adoption of a technology that provides actionable information to the patients, to the physicians. So that, I think, is, and maybe any of you guys can talk about it. I know, Ted, you have specific investing experience in this space. But I think that specific case study goes to, I think, a lot of what will be coming as we get more specific actionable information from some of these genomics studies, reports.
Well, I invested in Natera because I asked my son, would he pay for the test if the insurance company wouldn't, and he said absolutely.
Well, maybe talk about what Natera is, and non-invasive prenatal testing.
They
For
do
folks who
non-invasive,
don't know.
they do non-invasive prenatal testing. They can determine in a fetus at 9 weeks of pregnancy, they can determine whether they have 89 different genetic abnormalities of one sort or another. Most monosomies, trisomies, single nucleotide variations, copy number variations, microdeletions, all kinds of things. And so my son...
substitute for the amnio, which mothers used to have to decide,
Yes.
should I do the amnio, which has certain risk factors, it's a very long needle,
This was
uncomfortable.
so much easier.
Invasive,
So much easier.
yeah.
It was a simple blood draw at 9 weeks of pregnancy
From the mother, yeah.
from the mother. And the free-floating DNA, interestingly enough, a pregnant woman at 9 weeks has approximately 5% of the free-floating DNA in her blood is from her fetus, not from her. And so it's available, it's visible there. And I find that it's extremely important, and I believe that we are going to find in the future every child who's born is already going to have their genetics in their medical record, and that's going to influence their doctor's behavior for the rest of their lives.
So maybe talk a little bit around the physician adoption and that actionable information, because I think, you know, as you hear about these stories, it's the mothers who are asking for this test just as much as the physicians are recommending it, because the mothers want something that's not just faster, cheaper, and safer, but it's more pleasant to the patient. So I think maybe talk a little bit around the adoption of that, because I think it's pretty fantastic. Hopefully other things we'll see to come.
Well, the last thing a parent wants to do is to have to basically deal with a Down syndrome child for the next 40 years or something like that. So they will pay for this out of their own pocket if it comes to it. Now, right now, it's gone in network, and now insurance companies are paying for it because they realize that if the baby is seriously genetically defective, the mother will probably abort the baby in some fashion or another, and that will save the insurance company a lot of money as well. But I think that this is fundamental. This is what health is about to a certain extent. And now, there are dangers in this too, okay? For example, you may actually be able to determine from a person's genome whether they're going to live to be at 90 years old or 60 years old, which means the life insurance company may want that information, okay? So there are also HIPAA requirements.
Which is not protected now under GINA, yeah.
Yeah, so there are a lot of issues
life
around that,
insurance.
yeah, for life insurance. So, I mean, the HIPAA does protect a lot of that information, but at the same time, we're living in a world now where this information will get out and be public. And so, now I think as we farm this data, we're going to start seeing a great deal more information in there. We're going to see a great deal of information about what foods you're going to eventually be allergic to, or what foods are going to make you fat, things of that sort. We're going to be able to see whether you're more prone or less prone to colds, rhinoviruses, things of that sort. We're going to see a lot in this genetic information as we start farming it. And that's what AI is going to be good at.
And I think one of the things that's interesting are in the family planning side of these things. So couples that are either have a history of severe genetic disorders like ALS, or couples who are going through the IVF process for whatever variety of reasons, they may now pick the embryo that doesn't have the ALS mutation or doesn't have the cystic fibrosis sort of issues that you could detect through these upfront tests. So that's pretty interesting in terms of when you think about the ethics of where this is going.
I mean, they're already
You pick the
using
embryo that doesn't,
CRISPR.
well, that's
you
a
can
different.
fix cystic fibrosis. I mean, you can fix it now.
That's a different conversation around the
Yeah.
ethics of doing that
I
at the
understand.
embryo level.
I understand.
But that's the whole conversation around CRISPR and where do we go with that. Absolutely. Any other things to add from the panelists around prenatal testing, or we can switch topics to oncology because that's very similar in terms of.
How about I segue you to oncology?
Let's do it.
So prenatal testing, GRAIL. So what if you're pregnant, you think you're having a prenatal test, and you find out you're actually having a cancer test? You know, when they sequence your free-floating DNA, it turns out you're have some cancer somewhere in your body. That's how it happened. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that we all are going to have to come to a world where we're going to be courageously facing information about ourselves that we never thought about facing before. You know, if it's when we die, how we're going to die, you know, what diseases we have early stage, there's no clinical manifestation. So beyond the technology, there's a whole need for this genetic counseling, all sorts of healthcare services, information services, consulting services, I think that are is going to be part of helping us deal with all this information, because I don't think most of us are going to be willing to let a computer tell us how to make those fundamental choices in the beginning. They will guide us, but they won't ultimately choose.
Well, until
for
we
us.
really have a large enough data set. I know that's what GRAIL is
Exactly.
working on building, but until you really have a large enough denominator, it's hard to rely on a computer. And even then, you want sort of the human intervention to kind of verify. So, Francois, I know we were talking earlier, or Jonathan earlier, around sort of oncology and sort of the power that companies like GRAIL or Garden or Freenome, other companies that are working on, which is basically detecting cancer at stage 1, stage 2 from a blood draw, when potentially there's something you can do about it through surgery. I know we were talking about this earlier, Jonathan, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so you know, stage 1 might be late for what GRAIL ultimately hopes to be detecting your cancer at. I think GRAIL is running million patient trials hundred thousands of patients trials. Soon it'll be longer. Once they find the early detection data, right now there's not much that we know we can do with it. The goal is surgery to cure early stage cancer. Most early stage cancers, take melanoma, there's actually no drugs that are indicated for cancers that early when we're detecting them already, say stage 1. So if you detect it even earlier, we don't have any knowledge or understanding of what to do with that patient in the medical system today. So that's going to be even larger longitudinal studies to figure out whether you can intervene that early. And also patients and doctors will just it's never going to be bad to detect that early, but the healthcare system will have to learn to efficiently deal with that, and there will be very different conversations between patients and their doctors.
And the
Yeah, I think
pharmaceutical
that
interventions will be different.
discussion is going to go beyond that, because I believe at the same time we are learning so much about genomics and genetics, we are also learning a lot about an acceleration, in fact, in our understanding of the proper diet for human body. And I think that we can start to see again a new paradox emerging that we're going to get early stage cancer detection. We'll have a hard time to understand what to do with that, but we already know what to do with early stage disease in any disease, and specifically, a disease like cancer, which is, a nutritive approach to cancer. So I think we're going to see the emergence of very interesting new protocols that are going to go and it's going to require hopefully not hundreds of thousands of patients like we need in rare right now for the early stage detection, but very strong prospective trial to look into the diets, and educate through the genetics of the patient, like Ted mentioned, what's a proper diet to help keep those patients healthy until the cancer really becomes, if it becomes, So I think we're going to see the emergence of a new thinking, and I think it's, maybe cancer is going to help us, in fact, finally get to the root of the problem that we have in this country, and I think we need to bring it on the table. It's not, genetics is not going to solve everything. We've got to take care of ourselves. We are already, as a nation, worse off than our parents in terms of longevity, if you think about it. If you eliminate the natal, the ability to save newborns and young infants and all that from infectious disease, you eliminate this population from the trends. We are, going backwards. We are, because of obesity epidemic in this country, we are less healthy than our parents by a mile.
So I think we're transitioning, or maybe we already have, into the topic of where are we going. And Francois, I know you have a lot of thoughts, and others do too, around sort of being proactive and focusing on wellness and sort of preventative medicine rather than sort of the reactive medicine that we're talking about. So I think this is in some cases direct to consumer applications of genomics. A lot of times it's physician mediated. But maybe kind of provide your bigger vision around sort of how folks are going to get this genomic information, and will it be genomics information, or is it more just like, hey, like here are some basic things we know based on your diet, nutrition for people who have this type of disorder or disease or this type of indication or not? So maybe talk a little bit more about your vision around wellness.
Well, I think, like I said, it's we know that it's going to be big data driven, but not just genetics. We all agree that it's going to be based on all kind of different interrogation about the patients. Family history, of course, but also, like I just mentioned, diet history. I mean, it's going to be a huge. It's going to be enormous in terms of the data collection we're going to get. And on that, we're going to be applying a lot of artificial intelligence, software, sophistication to understand really what's going to be happening with these patients.
So are there companies that you're seeing today that are trying to play in that
space? Let me get to
Sorry,
that. But I think that the big picture is, like, as I said, and I don't know, because it's moving so fast, right? I mean, nobody was really talking about the speed at which microbiome was happening in terms of sequencing 5 years ago. I mean, 5 years ago, it was all about human sequence. Now we learned that, not only human sequence is in minority in our body, but we have 10 times more, microbial genes that, we ever dreamed of, that, a healthy gut has 1,800 different species of microorganisms that make a microbiome. So we are learning so fast that it's very hard to predict what's going to be happening. I think what's important is to realize and talk about a bit what are the business models right now that are working, and the one that are going to be hopefully working in the future. One that comes to mind is a competitor, in fact, to one of Ted's companies that I'm chairman of. It's RCADX, and we have worked on, just published some very interesting data in pharmacogenomics, because it's still happening at that level, end of last year, showing the benefit of testing, before taking a drug for depression and anxiety. So Assurex already shown the value in depression. We added the dimension of anxiety, and the results are phenomenal. I mean, that I think it needs to be said that today genomics is successful. We've been able to show that, in our depression study, that the patients that were tested, not tested, but response rate was about at the level of 33%, 36%. And we were able to show that by testing, we moved that to 75%. We're not talking about increment, we're talking about more than doubling, okay, the response rate. Similar to what Assurex has found, we found the same thing in anxiety. So this is a paradigm that we have today. Genomics is working for the question we have today. I think what we want to get into is what are the questions of tomorrow that the genomics revolution can be able to solve. And I think that's a much harder thing to answer, because we already have some hints of where we're going. But like I said, revolutions in so many different fields is happening so fast. Who's to know that maybe much more focus on the microbiome will be so much more valuable than trying to just focus on human genes. I mean, nobody has this answer. We know that the microbiome affects so many different aspects of our health. Immunity, our ability to, our moods. I mean, it's enormous, right? And so the second company that I would mention, because the CEO is in the room today, it's a company that is currently really one of the few companies that's completely patient-centric, that is going to try to bring the power of medicine to the patient through a mobile application that allows them to really own their data and be able to share the data with the physician. Of course, they want to share the data with, even monetize the data with the pharma if they're interested into that. That's portable genomics that Patrick started a few years back. So these are the kind of, so this is really, the real future is, really moving forward. What are we going to do with all this data, and how are we going to, take care of ultimately what we want to do as a patient. So, sorry, I just,
No, it's good. I think Beth had a couple comments around the
I was just trying
nutrition and wellness,
to, exactly, and the microbiome. So I think there's a company in Israel called Day 2, which is sequencing your microbiome to help explain your individual response to food. So, the ad will tell you never eat a banana, right? It gives you belly fat. But if you go in and you test individuals, some individuals don't get any glycemia from a banana, others do. So why? And it's not only just your static DNA that you were born with. It's your environmental DNA and gene expression. And then one more point, besides, I always say food is the, if you're going to spend money on drugs, I'd rather spend money on food than on pharmaceuticals. Because food is a drug. It's the most important drug you put in your body. And then I think the other thing is exercise. So we all know that your gene expression profile changes with exercise. So it's one thing to know what your gene is, but to know how much of it is being expressed at a given moment of time. And your doctor tells you exercise 1 more hour a week, and you do, and you go back the next time, and your cholesterol is way back below trouble territory. You're getting into the baseline, and all of a sudden you exercise 1 more hour a week, and it's down, and you didn't change anything about how you ate. That to me is really powerful.
And recent studies have shown meditation helping also in terms of level of stress. You know, in the
Meditation,
body,
yeah.
reducing the the expression of stress genes. I mean, it's like Ted said, it's all about epigenomics right now, and it's a much more complicated picture than we ever did.
Absolutely. So any questions from the audience? I promise we would be interactive, but we haven't asked yet. So raise your hand, interject. Yeah, okay.
No, I do have one question.
Oh, please.
I could ask you actually. As you're all genomics investors, how do you vet an early stage startup in genomics? Like what kinds of technology focus are you looking for, and how do you verify there's a good opportunity for you to invest?
Yeah, so I think each one of us should probably take that. Ted, it sounds like you're ready.
All right, I'm ready to go. I'm always looking at genetic problems that help a doctor solve a particular problem in front of him. The patient he's got right in front of him, and he's trying to figure out what to do about that patient. So to me, I always call a doctor right after I see a genetic startup of some sort or another and ask him, is this solving a burning problem you've got, or is it just kind of cool? If it's kind of cool, I don't invest. If it's solving a burning problem that he's got, do I use this drug or that drug on this patient, as opposed to trial and error or experimentation or something like that. Knowing what drug to use, or knowing whether this baby is going to need special care when they're born, or something like that. That's what I invest in.
Is it actionable? Yeah.
Actionable. Is it clinically actionable?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's clearly very important. On top of that, so all the investments that we do in J&J Innovation are aligned with the strategy of J&J, which is a disciplined annual process, and so that's the first thing. But I think one of the other places where genomics can help us a lot is in biologic insights. So how well do we understand disease? So for genomics technologies that patients and doctors are ready to deploy in the field, I agree it needs to be actionable and accessible, affordable, reliable. But for sometimes those breakthrough insights that tell you in biology that there's actually a relatively simple solution to something that's up to this point been complex is another great place to, the type of investment is different, but it's really helping that tool come to life.
And what stage do you guys typically look at? Does it
We don't have
does
a
it range?
typical stage.
Yeah. Jonathan.
All right, I'll see if I can fit in talking about two different types of technology. We've been making a fair number of investments in sort of enabling technologies which we haven't touched on, DNA sequencing, DNA writing, which there's still a long way to go, and in 5 or 10 years there will be viable competitors to Illumina. There probably are not today. There really aren't, but there will be. But though in those areas, we look at companies that enter, the complexity of those systems in a sequencing system, and someone told me Illumina's cluster generation uses 8 enzymes. And there's incredibly dynamic systems, so the engineering talent and understanding of how to develop a system like that is very different from traditional life science. So that's something where look at really what's the engineering talent and the background of the people involved. On clinical application side, especially in diagnostics, one key thing is making sure people have a realistic expectation of commercialization and the regulatory environment, mainly today around reimbursement. Not so much are you going to get approved or not. You see a lot of pitches that people think they will have a reimbursed CLIA diagnostic in 2 years from now, and that won't happen. So having that basic understanding that's a first checkbox for me and a lot of things we look at.
What to add to that? Well, I think that there's 2 different type of investment we've made in this space. One which is very, very focused on, like Jonathan was mentioning, on immediate need in diagnostics. And I would double what Jonathan said, and I would triple it because it's all about reimbursement. It's all about how you're going to get your commercialization strategy focused and convince me that your reimbursement is real. And in fact, we are really struggling a bit with that with our current company, even if we have very successful clinical data. So it is very difficult in this environment to grow a significant diagnostic company, even when you have very good data. So I would completely concur. The other aspect of it is really in terms of, so that's what I'm talking about, the more pragmatic, investment and really focusing on today and 2 to 3 years down the road. But we also looked, like we did with portable genomics, as what are the concepts out there that are truly disruptive, and the idea of, again, a patient-centric platform that's very new was attractive to us. The other idea that Patrick has developed that I felt was very, very innovative was the fact that we all talk about it, but nobody does it, is how do you bring the patient also to benefit from its clinical and genomic data, and this platform is doing that, meaning that it's not just the companies that benefit from the data if it's used in a clinical setting or the drug development. The patient is receiving also some monetary contribution. So those kind of disruptive approach to the space, I think this is what we're looking at as well.
So I'll add to that a little bit about Illumina Accelerator's investment strategy now that we've been investing in companies for a little bit over 2 years. So far we have 10 companies that have graduated, and the majority of the companies that we're working with are developing downstream breakthrough applications in genomics. So at Illumina Accelerator, we provide a lot of resources to the company, capital and access to capital, sequencing expertise, and access to our system so that companies can generate a lot of data, coaching on how to build a business, and kind of define their go-to-market strategy, et cetera. And then the fourth is a lab and office space in San Francisco. So the companies that can really maximize those 4 resources are the ones we try to work with, and usually those are seed stage companies that have either been around for a year or 2 or are a couple of folks with an idea on the whiteboard, and they're really kind of pushing the boundaries of where genomics can go. So we've invested in companies across a number of different applications, including agriculture, including microbiome, including women's health, including diagnostics. A number of companies are developing therapeutics, so using next-gen sequencing data to identify new drugs, new drug targets. Synthetic biology. Jonathan mentioned a little bit about that when he was talking about the enabling technologies. We have a couple of investments now we've made in the synthetic biology space, or it used to be called industrial biotech, depending on the type of company. So those areas I think are really interesting for us as well. The microbiome space, as I mentioned, we have a number of investments in that space, really because never before did we have the tools to really uncover and identify the actors in a microbial community that are involved in influencing different environments. So we can see a lot of new applications in genomics in that. And agricultural as well, we have a couple of companies that are working on plant and animal health. We have a company, Resilient, who will be on a panel on Wednesday this week, and they're sort of trying to perturb the microbiome community of the respiratory tract for bovine, for cows. So a $3 billion market, trying to be sort of an antibiotic alternative to combat the antibiotic resistance we see on the farms. So there's all sorts of applications that the genomics can kind of open up the doors to. We're also interested in upstream opportunities that are kind of preparing samples to be kind of run on our sequences, or kind of to help scientists kind of run their experiments for further downstream sequencing. So those are the areas that we're really interested in, and really what we're looking for is a great team. It kind of comes down to some of the basics of venture investing. What is the company? Are they backable? Is this team backable through the ups and downs of a company trying to make it? The technology is important, obviously, but if the team doesn't work, the technology will never work. And if the team works, they can find a new technology if they need to, or they can revise it or kind of bring something else in-house. So at the end of the day, we're really backing teams, and we really pay a lot of attention because we're starting so early. We pay a lot of attention to the team dynamic, what's their background, can they build great folks around them to kind of really give these companies the best chances of success.
I was going to comment on one thing too. We've been talking most of the time today about reading the genome. When we start writing the genome, that's going to be a huge and potentially ethically serious problem. If we can literally produce children that are 7 foot tall or something of that sort, and we think we are going to do this. What I worry about is, frankly, North Korea starts producing an army that's all 7 foot tall. or something of that sort. We are coming to an age where reading the genome is one thing, writing the genome is something else.
Writing/editing, you can use either technology.
Yes, well, in effect,
Yeah.
that's what you're doing when you're
Sure,
editing, you're
sure.
writing the genome.
Sure, okay, gotcha. You're
And
talking
so
about
I think CRISPR is a huge thing, and I'm already seeing a number of companies that are doing this, that are dealing with monogenic mutations like cystic fibrosis, for example. They can fix that now in a fetus before the fetus is born. So we are coming to a very interesting age, and I think also some very interesting ethical questions.
So I wanted to switch gears and, well, actually continue the conversation around investing and sort of thinking about what we were talking about before around how this is so data-centric, how artificial intelligence and machine learning, deep learning, all these things are becoming so critical because there's so much information. So it requires a very multidisciplinary approach for genomics-driven companies, whether that's in agriculture, whether that's in human health, or whether that's in environmental sort of science. I think you really have to have a multidisciplinary team. So thinking about this from an investor strategy, really trying to understand how do you invest in the space, how do you make sure you have the right investors around the table to support this company who may need different strengths and different types of expertise from the board. So maybe talking a little bit around the multidisciplinary nature of these companies, and Jonathan, if you want to kind of lead into that.
Sure. So one thing in this area, diagnostics, medical devices, on the venture side, people talk about that there's not very many investors. And in a lot of cases, it's just that the traditional VCs that are known in the biotech space haven't been playing as heavily in this space, but there really have been funds that even I'm surprised to find out about sometimes that have been quite active. So the syndicates are much more diverse than your typical therapeutics companies. I think also we see a lot more international investors, especially in China. NIPT is an example where it's absolutely incredible how fast that's rolled out through China. And there's many strategic investors that are incredibly, very credible, that are great to have in syndicates because it's
A huge market.
A huge market, and in many ways have or about to leapfrog. So that diversity of investor syndicate is needed because the traditional VCs aren't all investing in this space, and it's that's where the expertise lies.
Yeah, I think ideally you have somewhere in your investor collection people that cross over within an individual between tech and information management or information development and analytics and healthcare, or some sort of sense of which information is valuable, because on the tech side it's all about creating information and serving it up, but you have to serve it up in a useful way for the value proposition on the healthcare side, and that's tricky. That's what I think we're still trying to negotiate. For the most part, there's some examples of being successful, but there's many more places that we're still sorting that out. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's a great opportunity for both tech and sort of traditional life science investors, even for a therapeutics company, to co-invest. If it's a data-driven therapeutics company in genomics or not. But I think that's still a challenge. You see tech investors now paying a lot of attention to therapeutics and traditional life science investing. But I think there's sometimes a difference in expectations around valuation in terms of the milestones that companies need in terms of timeline, a regulatory path. So I think that's a little bit of a challenge because the tech investors are less valuation sensitive. Because I think, in my mind, I think they're shooting for like the zero, it's all or nothing in a tech investor. And they're used to that because they've been able to succeed in that. But in the life science range, is my philosophy again, I think they're a little bit more sensitive to valuation because they have been able to achieve exits that weren't like a $5 billion exit, but maybe they're a $600 million exit, and that's great if they didn't put too much money into the company. So I think the valuations are a challenging thing, but if you have sort of tech and life science investors, but I know they want to work together, I know they have a lot to learn from each other, and they already are doing that. But I think that for me, it's a little bit of the thing we saw with digital health, where it's kind of like this data information challenge and sort of this healthcare system kind of connectivity, but sort of a little bit of a mismatch. So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of who steps up and how folks co-invest together. And maybe it's the corporates who are going to drive a lot of it. Lumina's investing, J&J's investing, Google's investing. Jeff Bezos is investing, Gates is investing, so maybe it will be sort of the corporates who are, I guess some of those were individuals, but anyway, it's fascinating. So how much more time do we have? Okay, so we're out, but you guys didn't ask any questions, or we
I have
didn't
a
give you a
question.
chance. Okay, yes.
I would like to be a little bit provocative and ask the panel about what is their positioning in regards of very specifics of genomics. For example, we all agree about the use of genomics and genomics being key for the medicine today. But when it comes to regulations, that's a different thing. So what is the impact of the hurdle of the regulation into a genomics investment? Then we all agree that genomics is becoming a commodity today. You get a microbiome for $99, soon a genome for $100.
But it has to be a quality. I'll challenge on the microbiome, because they're
but-
not all equal.
I'm going further. I'm going one step further. Some companies have started to offer for free genomics data to patients. So how does this business models today impact a genomics investment? And third, the more we talk about genomics, the more we talk about phenotype. And this is a story of precision medicine. You need genomics, you need phenotype. So are you considering right now when investing into genomics only, or adding this level of phenotype investigation?
So he asked like 3-4 questions at once. Does anybody
I'll
want to take
grab
each
the
one?
lab.
Yeah. Okay.
The last one is definitely technologies that can integrate multiple streams of information at once. So if you can know the RNA complement in a cell, the DNA complement, and you can also know the protein complement, and those can be integrated, and it can be done affordably and quickly enough so that you can look at systems of cells. That is definitely a space that we are anxious to make some investments in.
I'd reinforce that. A lot of my investing now is about RNA, not about DNA, because I want to know what's being expressed. I'm not so interested in what's sort of sitting in the genome, because a lot of times it can be not activated. It may be epigenomically silenced in some fashion or another. So I look very hard at what's being expressed. And quite frankly, I look at diseases that are right now serious and the genomic aspects of them. What are the mutations that are involved in those diseases? I don't look at how to make 7-foot-tall people at the present time. I don't look at how to make them, smarter or healthier or something like that. I look at serious problems they've got and how do I fix them.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, Francois, anything to add to Patrick's question?
Yeah, I would say that Patrick is right when he said that some companies are offering the genome for free. So how do you invest? Well, like in your company, you just have to look at the business model and how you make money somewhere else. Right?
Monetizing the data, perhaps.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, this kind of approach requires a very, very smart, on the back end approach. So you're going to be successful commercially. And so you have to have a very strong plan. If you start spending a lot of money up front to have a free genome, you better make sure that your strategy is solid on whatever it is, a B2C or a B2B approach that you're going to be taking to make up for that investment. So, and I think you are a very good example of potentially that. So I think it's all, obviously we're going to see so many different variations on the theme. I think ultimately, I would say what I'm looking at as in investing in this space is, really finding an approach that is revolutionary, but at the same time, doesn't take 10 years to pan out, and the commercial strategy is somehow, already vetted, or it makes a lot of sense. So common sense and key understanding of the market, but also something that is very innovative.
All right, so I think we have to wrap up. I know Lucy's kicking us out of here. Well, thank you guys so much, and thank the panelists for their time. Appreciate it.